In this video, I'm going to show the repair and painting of this hood. I'm actually starting with the finished product so you can kind of see what things look like and determine whether you want to continue watching. But in any case, what I started with was a damaged carbon fiber hood, and kind of asked myself, well, I could look at it in a bad way, or I could end up customizing it, turning it into something unique, which is what I chose to do. And I think it turned out pretty well. Not being a professional, I think the end product is pretty good. There's just a pinch of contamination in the paint, but it's not bad. This is nice and smooth. Just a pinch of orange peel around the edge here because I wanted to avoid any kind of runs there. But really overall, nice finished product, and I think relatively unique. So what we end up having here is this exposed carbon fiber, which is just clear coated, prepped and clear coated. And then I masked that off and then had put the base coat on, removed the masking, and then cleared the whole thing. But you can see that ended up looking like a pretty soft transition because I masked it twice. I don't necessarily have to do that, but it's kind of extra credit. So any case, check out the video, and please leave comments. I do appreciate hearing from you guys, especially tips and tricks people have come across. Appreciate hearing from the pros. Even good constructive criticism is all appreciated. And also, don't forget to subscribe. Anyways, so my idea, and I don't want any harsh transitions. I'm going to try to make this as relatively subtle, but what I'd like to do is to have these edges all base coat, clear coat, the center base coat, clear coat, and then these ridges right here. So I'm going to tape these off. That whole kind of ridge there, you can see the sunlight kind of highlighting that area there. I'm going to tape that off and then leave that the carbon fiber appearance. So basically this is going to get base coat with this taped off, and then I'm going to remove all of that, and then I'll probably do a layer of clear base coat with just a little bit of the factory color to kind of blend that in just a little bit, but to have enough of that carbon fiber appearance that it kind of shows through a little bit. I may leave it just carbon fiber if it matches the color of the truck enough, but I don't, again, want any real rough transitions. I don't like flashy stuff, so I want it to be a relatively subtle thing. So I do have some clear base coat that I can mix with the truck's color base coat in maybe a fairly dilute proportion. That way it just gives a little bit of color over that. But we'll see how that actually turns out. So should be interesting. We'll see how everything goes. This has all been prepped, this surface here, with either scuff pad, or actually I use 400 on a DA for a lot of the areas. But on the part that I'm just clearing over, I'm going to end up, I started with 400, but I'm going to end up going up to probably 600 or even 800. Well, actually probably more like 800 or even 1,000 grit, because I don't want any imperfections to really show through there if I can help it. All right. All right, so next part to discuss is what kind of sandpaper, what grit do you want to use for preparation of this panel? So that depends a little bit on what your next layer is going to be. And again, I'm not a professional, so actually there may be a better way to do this, but this is how I do it in my advice, which has worked out pretty well for me. So if we were going to do primer on top of this panel, you could actually be a little bit more aggressive with grit. You could be like 220 or something like that, because you're going to smooth that out again, and the primer is going to add a little bit of build to fill in any kind of surface irregularities from that aggressive or relatively aggressive grit. Okay. Now in this case, though, you could, because this is other than here where we had filler and such, you could just base coat over this and then clear coat on top of that. If you're going to do base coat on top of this, then you do not want anything, I would say, more aggressive than 400 grit. You might even consider something like a 600. So what happens if you screw that up and you go too aggressive with the grit? So your grit is too low. Let's say we prep this with 220 and then we were to just base coat over that. Well, base coat can conform to the surface pretty well, and you may end up seeing those scratches from the sandpaper in your finished product. So you want to be a little bit careful, because that could potentially not look so great. Sometimes it's super subtle and it won't make much difference, but we're trying to do as good of a job as we can. So it's good to have a smart selection for your sandpaper. So again, kind of 400 grit would be my recommendation for this. It's rough enough that you're going to get the surface prep that you need for a good adhesion, but it's not so rough that you're going to see those scratches in the final product. All right, so I just want to show a few tips as you're moving forward with preparing this surface. So now keep in mind, we aren't actually trying to smooth anything out. It's not that this panel has been, repaired everywhere. The only repair was here, which we did have to smooth out, but the rest of it is just the way we want it. We just need to prepare it for additional coatings. So wet paint layers can stick to each other chemically, like clear coat on top of a recently base coated panel, but this is completely dry, right? So the only way that you're going to get anything to stick to that is through mechanical adhesion. So we need small little scratches in there to help increase the surface area that next layer can stick to, okay? So in order to do that, you have a few options. One of the best options, especially for the flat areas, is a DA. So DA actually that's a dual action sander, meaning that it doesn't just rotate orbitally, it also moves back and forth. So you can see a good example of that here, where I had a little bit of primer that shows that action. So it's almost like a swirl all over the place. Okay, basically what we're looking to see that the panel turns from this shiny color to this dull color. So if I paint over this will be good, but this is too smooth. The paint could delaminate, flake, or whatever you want to say. It's going to look crummy. So we have to be very diligent about getting all of these nooks and crannies and everything. Now, you don't want to go crazy with the DA. It's very good for the flat areas, probably honestly the best for the flatter areas. And I'm saying flat, like it works great on these kind of gentle curves. But in here, it's a little bit more challenging. You do not want to bring that thing up on edge and put grooves into there, meaning that if I go like, see that angle there where I start to come up on edge, do something like that and you're going to damage your panel. So if you're going to go on a surface like this, you have to try to be as flat as possible. Now, does it mean you can't do any more curves? Well, not necessarily. You can see as I was doing this, I was able to actually always keep moving, just sort of matching that curve of the panel. You can do that. You have to be careful. Again, if you sit too much in one place, like here, you're going to get a flat spot. So see, if I was like that and just moving up and down like that, I could get a flat spot, and then that's going to be potentially seen in the final product. So you always want to keep moving, never letting this thing sit still and matching the curve of the panel. So what else could we do? So, this is, these are great. These will flex and form to accommodate any of those surfaces, and that's good. The thing you don't want to do is use your hands with sandpaper. You might be tempted to do that, but the only place that you should ever really do that is if there's no other option, okay? Because your fingers will put grooves in things. So you always want to use a sanding board of some sort. Now on the really small nooks and crannies, like right into here, scuff pad works perfect, okay? So again, we don't need to remove a ton of material. We're literally just roughing this up. So this here will get in there. You can see it's already kind of making it nice and dull. Now, keep in mind though, even though it's nice and easy to just move in that one direction, that's not ideal. That will work, but it's better to have scratches that move in different directions, just like the DA. So if you can do little circles like that, that's the best. Or, you know, back and forth like this and then kind of crossing like that. Either one's fine, but you want scratches in different directions. That gives you the optimal surface area for that next layer to mechanically adhere to, okay? So as you're preparing the surface on your hood, once you start thinking you're getting pretty close, I recommend using some wax and grease remover, getting everything cleaned off, because your spots that still need more preparation will become a little bit more obvious once you start cleaning. So you can see actually right there, just a little bit of shininess here. I can see some right there. So as you kind of move around, use lighting in your shop to help kind of highlight those areas, because you want to take extra special time, especially in these kind of irregular areas like this, because any of those areas that are shiny at the end and not adequately prepared could run you into trouble later with paint delaminating or peeling or whatever. So I've done a preliminary cleaning out in the regular part of the shop, and then I moved this into the paint booth, which I have nice and clean. Went ahead, mopped the floor, made sure I had all the dust out of here as much as possible, so that way we can reduce contamination. Now I'm moving towards a little bit of additional prep work on the inside of the hood, because even these edges you want to make sure are prepped. I did that with the scuff pad, kind of nice circular motions to give yourself some increased surface area to help that mechanical adhesion to the base coat. And then I did a little bit of additional cleaning with, you can use lacquer thinner. I do like to use it because it's way cheaper. I mean, 10 to 15 bucks for a gallon. You gotta be a little bit careful with that stuff. It can dissolve primers and stuff like that if you're not cautious. You leave it wet too long. A little bit more gentle wax and grease remover, which is great, but that stuff like over there, that can be almost $50 a gallon. So use that a little bit more sparingly. But anyways, we got a nice clean surface where that tape is going to adhere and where the base coat's going to go. I like to do a strip of tape, and I used a really nice tape here. That's that one there, the 233 plus. I do have a separate video showing the pros and cons to different tapes, at least a few of them. But anyways, I like that because then I have this a relatively flexible tape that I can use to fit into those curves, because you can see it's not just a straight line. And then I'm going to adhere the masking paper to that, okay? And I like to do that again because then I can fit this to the curves, and you want to make sure that you get in all these kind of nooks and crannies, make sure it's well adhered. If it starts to come up or anything like that, you're going to get paint creeping in there, okay? So just take some extra time to do this step because this is going to be the part that makes the finish work, or the kind of icing on the cake to the job look right. So now it's all masked off, and I'm sure there's really other ways to do it, but I'll show you my take from kind of hobbyist perspective. Now, important to make sure that, again, you go over all your edges, make sure everything's adhered nice. You might ask, why do I use the blue tape on the inside and the 233 plus on the outside? Well, the blue tape's a little cheaper, so it doesn't so much matter that it's going to come off cleanly. It's as flexible, etc. So just trying to be a little bit of cost savings there. Now, with all of this, I do this with my hands. So this is the only step I literally do without gloves, because it's hard to peel tape away with without bare hands. So when you're done doing that, keep in mind oils from your skin can kind of affect the adhesion to the other surfaces. So I'll sort of gently clean around there. You don't want to go crazy, because your solvents that clean the surfaces can cause the tape to not adhere. So just be cautious, but keep that in mind. Then from this point on, I'll use gloves for really every other part of this process. Right now, everything is clean, and I'm going to move forward with taping. Now, important to keep in mind, now that I got the hood in the paint booth, I did see a few areas I just used with the scuff pad that I could actually identify a few kind of linear lines in here where I got kind of lazy and was just sanding like that. What you really want, especially in this area that's just going to be clear coated, meaning it's going to be carbon fiber with another layer of clear, is you do not want to be able to visualize any scratches, because those may show up in the finished product. So I just went over there with just a nice fresh scuff pad, a fresh one, because I didn't want to make extra debris, and then kind of went in there real small circular movements, because the linear marks are more easy to pick up with the eye than the small irregular ones. And now we're at the point where I really can't identify any scratches in there, so a good coating of clear over that should look effectively perfect. All right. So next step, because I'm going to paint this area, and leave this kind of that carbon fiber look, is I'm going to use a fine line tape like this, which gives you the ability to make a little bit better curves and such. And then I will do the remaining taping with the 233 plus. So then what we'll have is we'll have paint and clear on all this part, all that part, and then this shape here will be carbon fiber color. I may add just a pinch of base color to that, I'm not sure, because I want it to be sort of subtle, but the factory color may actually blend pretty well with the carbon fiber. I don't want it to look flashy and wild, I just want a nice subtle appearance of that carbon fiber kind of fitting its way into the appearance, because I do love the appearance of carbon fiber, and that's a pretty well crafted hood. All right, so now you can kind of see what I had in mind. I'm following the sort of natural shape here. Now, with that tape, don't be afraid to, change things around a little bit, because as you do it, if you realize your curves aren't real graceful, they're a little bit more edgy than you want, sometimes you have to kind of redo it. Just the only thing I noticed when using this kind of tape is if you are going to overlap it, you just got to get in there with a fingernail or something, make sure it really is adhered down, because you can see there's an opportunity for that to kind of come up and off of the panel, because it's raising up the thickness of the tape that's underlying it. So, I mean, ideally you'd use one strip all the way from front to back so there's no overlapping. But that said, if you do it like that and you're careful, it'll work out well. You can see those lines look nice and smooth though. All right, so now I'll fill that in with the 233 plus, and then we'll do it on the other side and be ready to rock and roll. All right, so now the hard part's done. I got the fine line tape down, and I can just fill in the gaps with that other masking tape there, the 233 plus. Now, really key piece to doing anything like this where you have any type of shape that you're trying to add, especially if there's one on each side, is to really make sure that they're symmetric. Really key feature of things that are visually appealing to the human eye is symmetry. So, I mean, even to the point where I measured distances here and here to make sure those are very similar. Did that in the back, really kind of comparing side to side to make sure that it's gonna look not only appealing from one side, but also that they're relatively or very close to being symmetric. Okay. Completely masked and ready for one more cleaning with solvent and then tack cloth to kind of just make sure we're nice and clean before laying down base coat. But you can see I have it such that the masking tape is just beyond the border of the fine line tape, because you want to make sure there's adequate adhesion to that fine line tape. You don't want paint creeping through there, but you also don't want your masking tape getting into your actual shape there. So, because we spent a lot of time making sure the fine line tape is the shape we want, but you can see it actually looks pretty good. I do spend a little bit of time kind of making sure things are smooth. That way, again, paint doesn't creep in through some area that you didn't press down firmly and adhere there. But that gives you a pretty good idea of the shape we're looking at. All right, so now I'm ready to start painting. I've thoroughly prepared the surfaces. Really important to clean. You can use a number of solvents, but typically like a wax and grease remover or paint prep works really great. And then right before you're about to paint, and sometimes in between coats, use a tack cloth like that. That helps to pick up any residual dust. Now, when you're a hobbyist like me and your paint booth is repurposed for other things when you're not painting, you got to be a little bit careful about contamination. So my intake is over here. Once I close that door, airflow will come from the door and go this way. So anything I'm painting, I try to keep on this side because that'll reduce contamination. Anything that is in here, I try to cover with clean plastic to help reduce contamination. I've freshly mopped my floor, also helps to reduce the dust and contamination that way. Okay, so that's pretty important, so you actually have a nice looking panel and not contaminated with a bunch of dust and debris. All right, so next step, where you got our gun all set up, and I do have other videos kind of showing the details of that, but I'll have my pressure adjusted per the recommendations on the technical data sheet, which you can see here. They tell you which tip to use and then what to set your pressures at, and it is different for clear and for base coat there. So important to pay attention to what size tip you're using like that, okay? And then I have my fan control here all the way out and then in a quarter, so all the way to the left or all the way counterclockwise and then clockwise just a quarter turn, so you get a pretty wide fan. And then my fluid control, I have it wide open. Okay, so all the way out, and I'm going to have full range of that trigger then. Okay, I've gone ahead and shaken my paint. This is actually a pretty nice device here. It was under $100. I think Astronomatic makes that. But anyways, if you don't have that, then make sure you do a good job with stirring or shaking by hand, so that way especially these metallic colors, metallic will settle pretty quick. Use your filter to put into your gun, and then use a mixing container to make sure you have your solvent and your base coat or your catalyst and your clear coat all in the appropriate proportions. Okay, so now let's move forward with the fun part here. We'll get these panels nice and pretty. Alright, so the hood has its base coat on it. Looks pretty decent. There's light contamination, which is expected, but tolerable amount. I'm going to go ahead and remove the masking now. Now there's some pros and cons to when you take that off. If you were to take it off almost immediately after the last base coat, you get a little bit of a softer edge as the paint kind of moves into where that tape edge was. But the downside of that is if you have contamination on your tape or you're not very careful, you can get debris into the wet paint, which is obviously not good. So manufacturer recommendation for this base coat is waiting 20 minutes, trying your best to pull the tape off carefully at about a 45-degree angle. So that's manufacturer recommendation, which is roughly what I'm going to do.